After leaving Wyoming, I headed on for the Black Hills of South Dakota. There were 4 really cool attractions that I wanted to see, all near the city of Custer, so that was where I was going to spend the next 2 days.
First stop this morning is the Jewel Cave National Monument. I'm really looking forward to getting into some caves. I'll do this one and Wind Cave today. There's unfortunately a lot of construction going on this site, so the visitor center is not the most appealing area. I showed up a little too late to go on a tour of the cave yesterday. They were closing up shop at the visitor center, but then I took a hike down in the woods, which just over the tree line there had been a pretty big forest fire, and it's all kind of cleared out, just trunks of trees left standing. But despite that, it was still a really nice hike, very cool weather, and worked out pretty well. But let's go check out the cave.
Jewel Cave is currently the 3rd longest known cave system in the world. But what's really amazing about these caves is how compact they are from the surface. The latest known distance of Jewel Cave is 166 miles, but it's all occurring on just 3 square miles on the surface. So the caves twist and wind all around each other. It's really cool. The most common rock formation that you will see in Jewel Cave is a calcite crystal. It has a little bit of a shine to it. That's where they get the name Jewel Cave. I didn't think that the calcite crystal in itself was really that incredible, but the scale, the scope of these caves is what stood out for me. Both Jewel Cave and Wind Cave can be explored on a guided tour where they have pre-lit walkways and railings and steps. It's very easy to go through, but you can also do wild cave explorations, where you're going out into unmapped areas, seeing parts of a cave that have never been seen before by human eyes. I didn't get to do that on either of these trips, but it's something I would really love to do in my lifetime.
Alright, we finished with Jewel Cave, and now it's on to Wind Cave National Park.
And it's currently the 6th longest cave system in the world. It's a little bit shorter than Jewel Cave. The name Wind Cave comes from its single natural entrance. If a low pressure or a high pressure system comes into the area, the cave is at a different pressure, so all of the air in the cave has to rush in and out of this one entrance, creating wind, and that was how the cave was first discovered. What really makes Wind Cave stand apart is the rock formation called boxwork. It's extremely delicate. It's a calcite crystal that had flowed into the cracks of the limestone cave. And then the limestone around it all dissolved, so what's left is just the previous cracks that look on the end like open boxes. It's a very rare rock formation, and over 95% of the known boxwork in the world is found right here in Wind Cave. So if you've never seen it before, this is the place to go. It's really amazing to see boxwork throughout the cave at all different scales, considering how fragile it is and that it doesn't really exist anywhere else.
That's enough natural carving of caves. Now it's time for some man-made carvings. I just arrived at the Crazy Horse Memorial, which is a mountain carving in progress, and I'm about to head into the visitor center and check that out.
The Crazy Horse Memorial is going to be the largest mountain carving in the world. It is really impressive to see up close, and it's accompanied by the Indian Museum of North America and Native American Cultural Center nearby, basically the visitor center. But I found it to be very educational, very well-made and well-presented artifacts, and it's all in what looks to be a very expensive but well-maintained visitor center. In many ways, the Crazy Horse Memorial is a response to the Mount Rushmore Memorial, which is built just down the road. The Lakota people wanted to create a monument for one of their own great figures, as opposed to the 4 American presidents that were carved at Mount Rushmore. So they first started this idea in 1931, and eventually they found the sculptor Korczak, who would be the one that he and his family would see through the building of the Crazy Horse Memorial. He was actually one of the sculptors who had worked on Mount Rushmore, so it kind of made sense for this man to be the one to carry on the vision, and he really made it his life's work. I think that the entire exhibit and the memorial itself is extremely impressive, and it's definitely something that's worth going to see. At times it felt a little bit kitschy, especially the Native American celebration and demonstration that they were doing on the patio at the end, but I still very much enjoyed my time at Crazy Horse.
And of course now I've made it to Mount Rushmore. It's actually really impressive in size. I heard reviews of it that it wasn't really that large or it was pretty far away, but I'm quite impressed with how big it is. I'm marveling at it. I think it's one of the most imaged landmarks, and the images I've seen the most and hadn't ever been to. So it's nice to finally be here. Well, I really enjoyed the museum here at Mount Rushmore. It's really nice, simple, good lessons in history, statements about each president that makes up the memorial. Everything, there's a president's trail that runs around the outside, which I'm walking now. And yeah, it's all just very nicely finished, very well done. I think the visitor center is not as impressive actually as the Crazy Horse Memorial. That visitor center surrounding restaurants and everything else is really, really nice. Nicely finished, good take on history. But the actual viewing of the Crazy Horse Memorial is kind of limited right now, obviously, since it's not done. So it's kind of hard to compare. But here, I think with some completed trails, steps and viewing platforms all around, Mount Rushmore is really quite impressive. Definitely worth seeing both of these monuments.
Freedom. We strived for it. We died for it. We live for it.
When I arrived at the visitor center in Badlands National Park, I realized I hadn't really done any research on this one. I didn't know what to expect. But I was surprised to learn how much of the visitor center was dedicated toward dinosaur artifacts and extinct species in the area. But you can also watch scientists in the visitor center as they are cleaning and uncovering some of these bones. That was a really cool sight. I didn't hang out for too long in the visitor center. I decided I was going to go out for a hike. And let me tell you, there is nothing like hiking in the Badlands. You're able to do there what they call open hiking. The ground is eroding really rapidly, much faster than any place I've ever seen. It's kind of just a loosely packed mud. And because it erodes so quickly, it's pretty much impossible to maintain trails. So they don't necessarily have designated trails. They'll have occasionally some markers, just numbered in the distance to keep you on the right direction and make sure that you're not going into a canyon or getting stuck anywhere, but essentially you can walk wherever you want. And since the ground's eroding so quickly, having hikers moving all around doesn't really do any damage to the natural environment because that ground was just going to wear away anyway. What this means is hiking through Badlands is an incredibly free experience. You can go wherever you want to. You'll see people climbing on rocks and climbing down into gullies, and it was just really nice and a lot of fun.
I think this is probably the perfect weather to be hiking in Badlands. I would hate to be here if the sun was beating down on a really hot day. There's no shade, no source of water. Just not my idea of a fun time. But now it's overcast, it's windy, it's not raining. There's very few people out here. And it's a really, really nice day to be hiking.
As I headed out for my final hike of the day, I was able to see some bighorn sheep up on the cliff. It was amazing to watch how still they would sit, and despite the belief of one of the hikers near me, those were real. They weren't there when I passed by a little bit earlier, and if you look closely, you can see them move.
So far, the Notch Trail is somewhat similar to the open land at the Door Trail, but I think I reached the first key defining feature. This is a nice steep ladder, and after this, the trail description says there's a lot of cliff edges, crumbling rock, and narrow walkways. So we'll see just how interesting it gets.
I really enjoyed hiking the Notch Trail. It was perhaps a little more challenging than some of the other trails, and definitely something where if you're scared of heights or not very sure of your hiking ability, maybe you would want to avoid it. But I found it to be really cool. You get to walk along the edge of several cliffs, and there weren't too many people along the way, so that was a really nice hike. I'll say that's the end of the trail. I don't think you would want to walk any further than that, but when you get up to the top of the Notch Trail, you're rewarded with a great view of Badlands National Park, and back to that one area where there's actually some trees growing, one of the few small areas of the park where you can see quite a bit of greenery. The rest of it tends to be this drab gray color where it's all just mud and rock. But since you can't go any further, it was time to turn around and head back down the Notch Trail. The second half is a lot easier to film because I already did it. Let me just show you the second half of each of those clips. To wrap up my time in the park, I went to the Big Badlands overlook. Here you get just an incredible view of many islands of rock out in the distance. You can see the stratified layers, so in some ways it's like the Grand Canyon or Bryce Canyon, but a completely different landscape, a different color, and a much different feel than those parks had. If you haven't ever been to South Dakota, you might not realize that there's really a lot to do. I loved my time in the Black Hills, but wrapping up the day at the Big Badlands overlook was just an incredible experience. I made pretty quick work of the rest of South Dakota, but I was headed across the state to see Omaha, Nebraska, so I will see you there.
It just